When you're staring at a stack of security equipment options and wondering whether you'll end up spending a ton on a DVR that sits on a shelf gathering dust, that hesitation is real. You've probably thought, what if I buy the wrong system and end up with a clunky interface, a video feed that drops out, or a unit that just can't handle the cameras I already have? It's a valid concern, especially when you're balancing a tight budget against the need for reliable surveillance at home or in a small office. I've spent the last couple of weeks diving into the specifics of the Hikvision 8-channel DVR, looking at the kinds of setups people actually build, and reading through the limited technical data that's publicly available. If you want to check the product details on Amazon, the link is in the description. First off, let's talk about where this DVR actually fits into a typical DIY security landscape. An 8-channel model is aimed at folks who have a handful of analog or low-resolution IP cameras. Think a front door, a backyard, a garage, maybe a couple of interior rooms. The 6CIF 30FPS designation means the unit can output 6 streams at a standard resolution of 704,480 pixels at 30 frames per second. That translates to a decent level of clarity for basic monitoring without saturating your network or storage system. If you're planning to run Full HD or 4K cameras, you'll quickly run into bandwidth constraints, because those higher resolution feeds need far more data than the DVR can comfortably handle. So, the first question you need to ask yourself, are your cameras already in the analog or low-resolution IP world, or are you looking at newer, higher-definition models? If it's the former, this Hikvision box could be a solid match. If it's the latter, you might be better off with a NVR that's built for higher bandwidth. Now, consider the practical side of installation. The unit ships in a fairly standard casing, nothing overly flashy, but it's sturdy enough to sit on a rack or a shelf in a utility closet. Because it's a DVR, you'll be wiring each camera directly into the unit using coaxial cable or the appropriate analog connectors. That can be a bit of a chore if you're retrofitting an older property, but for a new build or a renovation where the cable runs are already planned, it's straightforward. The inclusion of an HDMI output is a plus for those who want to see a live feed on a TV or monitor without needing an extra video converter. It also supports a 16 TB hard drive, which gives you a solid amount of storage for a few weeks of continuous recording at the mentioned CIF resolution. If you need longer retention, say a month or more, you'll either have to upgrade to a larger drive or accept a lower recording schedule, like motion triggered only. One of the hidden trade-offs comes with the 6CIF 30FPS HDMI LP part of the name. The LP indicates low power mode, which is generally good for saving energy, but it also means that if you try to push the DVR to constantly record at the maximum frame rate across all 6 channels, you might see occasional frame drops. In real-world tests, people have reported that when all cameras are active and the system is set to record continuously, the footage can jitter a bit during peak activity. That isn't a disaster for most home surveillance tasks where you're usually interested in a clear snapshot when motion is detected, but it's something to keep in mind if you're counting on flawless playback for forensic purposes. Performance-wise, the system's ability to handle up to 8 input streams is generous for a small operation. The 2 extra channels beyond the 6CIF streams can still accept video, but they'll fall back to a lower resolution or frame rate, which can be useful if you have a couple of older cameras that only need a basic watch-only feed. This flexibility can be a real time saver, especially if you're integrating a mix of camera types. However, the lack of any explicit mention of PoE, power over Ethernet, means you'll still need a separate power source for each camera, which adds a bit of wiring complexity compared to more modern NVRs that can power cameras directly through the network cable. Let's turn to the user interface for a moment. The firmware that ships with Hikvision's DVRs is known for being fairly intuitive. There's a simple menu system that you can navigate with the supplied remote or via a mouse plugged into the unit. Most users find the live view layout easy to configure, and the playback functions let you scroll through footage by day, hour, or even minute. That said, the UI isn't as polished as some of the higher-end models you see on the market. You'll notice a few extra clicks to get to advanced settings like motion detection zones or alarm triggers. If you're comfortable spending a little extra time fine-tuning the system, that's not a problem. But if you want a plug-and-play experience with a sleek app that pushes everything,